Are you out of your Vulcan mind?
Whoa. One sec. Never get used to getting my molecules scrambled across space. Hey, I'll wait for a shuttle next time. Thank you. Hey guys, hello gorgeous. Welcome to another top 5 list, and I'm doing a top 5 favorite Star Trek characters because I'm very excited to announce that my wife is going to be having a segment on my YouTube channel starting next week. She is a big Star Trek fan, and she has made me a big Star Trek fan as well. I mentioned in one of the Toy Museum videos that if you are in a relationship, your partner, your loved one shouldn't just tolerate your hobby, and you shouldn't just tolerate your loved one's hobby. With empathy, you can actually enjoy their joy through them. You can enjoy their hobby through them. So my wife has always been a big Star Trek fan, and I just love how much she loves Star Trek, and I got into it too. I watched a little bit of Next Generation when I was growing up, but not very regularly. I was not into the Kirk show when I was growing up. It was a little too cheesy for my tastes at the time. But ever since meeting my wife, we've gone through TNG and loved it. We went through Voyager and loved it. We just finished Deep Space Nine and we loved it. So she's going to be starting a new segment on the channel. It's called a Star Trek Voyage. It is a really cool idea. She's going to go through all of these Star Trek TV shows and movies, one episode and one movie at a time, doing reviews. She's got some fun counters to go along, certain tropes that repeat over and over, like one of my favorites, Scotty's got to do it in less time than he would prefer to have. He's the miracle worker, the magic worker. Other tropes such as Spock calling something illogical, or Bones' classic "he's dead, Jim" line. So she's going to be reviewing all of the Star Trek episodes. She's starting with the original series, starting at the beginning by release. We're not talking about by chronological order, so she's not starting with Discovery or any of the prequel things. Starting with the William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy original series show, going one episode at a time. We're going to try it out, the schedule, doing it Tuesdays and Thursdays during the week, since I usually don't get any of my stuff up until the weekends. So it'll be a nice midweek thing to watch on the channel for you Star Trek fans. Watch along, comment along, join her in her Star Trek Voyage. So I'm really excited. I've been watching all of the episodes with her, and I'm having a blast going back in time and watching some classic Shatner and Nimoy and all the rest. And to get everybody in a Star Trek mood, I'm going to be doing my top 5 favorite Star Trek characters. And the top 5 lists are always really difficult to whittle down. That's the whole point of a top 5 list. It's a little tougher than a top 10 list. So when I sat down and really thought about it, man, it was kind of heartbreaking to not include certain characters like Data or the Cisco. It was really tough, but I've narrowed it down to 5, and here are my top 5 Star Trek characters. My lists are in no particular order, but this guy is number 1 in a lot of people's hearts. It is Captain Kirk from the original series, and going through some of the early episodes, I'm sitting there thinking, you know, it's not too far-fetched to say Star Trek owes a lot, maybe everything, to William Shatner, because without William Shatner's performance, his interpretation, his manic energy, his class, his suaveness, his intelligence, his quirky sense of fun on the original series, I don't know if Star Trek would have persevered. It didn't have a hugely successful run on TV at the time, canceled after 3 seasons, so that wouldn't be considered a really successful TV show, but I think in large part it was William Shatner as Captain Kirk that people just couldn't get out of their brains and couldn't get out of their hearts. I think that's why years later the Star Trek conventions continued, and the demand for a movie arose, and more movies, the animated series before that. They just kept bringing it back over and over again because it wasn't just something that was enjoyable for a couple years. I think it was a performance of a lifetime. There's people who grew up on the original series who still love popping in those newly remastered Blu-rays and watching William Shatner as Captain Kirk all those years ago. So he's an endearing character. Like I said earlier, I didn't grow up on him, but I really fell in love with the character when I actually started to watch some Captain Kirk. And I got over the campiness of it. It's very similar to the 60s Batman TV show with Adam West. Once you get over the initial campiness, the, oh my goodness, is this supposed to be intentionally bad? And you immerse yourself in that world, you start to realize the brilliance behind that performance. And now in Blu-ray, remastered, we get to see it sharper detail, bigger than we've ever seen it before on all these big screen TVs. And I'm really able to appreciate the subtlety, the nuances that William Shatner employed in the show, things that no one was aware of at the time, but now all these decades later, we're able to really see the incredible detail that he put in his performance. Number 2 on the list, or should I say number 2 on the list, is another original series character. It is Mr. Spock, played by Leonard Nimoy, and just mentioning him gives me a warm, fuzzy feeling. I love the character. I loved the actor who portrayed him. Speaking about the character himself, Spock is such a fantastic character to try to emulate. On the surface, it might not seem like a inspiring thing, a character who's trying to suppress his emotionality. But as we get to learn more about him, he's the Rock. He's the, not Dwayne Johnson, but the guy who is composed, intellectual, logical. And when the stuff hits the fan, he's the one that often keeps everything together, tries to keep everybody calm, tries to rationalize his way through situations. And the great thing about Spock in the original series is there were moments where he got to let loose. He lost control of his emotions, either through some sort of alien force or disease or something like that. But we got to see that range from Leonard Nimoy. And it's another great performance because he was an actor who possessed the range, but he also possessed the restraint to not go all out every single episode, kind of like what William Shatner does. It established an incredible yin and yang where you've got Shatner he's sometimes almost like his depiction on Family Guy, where he's just that cartoon character who warps from one side of the screen to the other. He's so animated and energetic, and Nimoy knew, I can't try to top this guy. There's no sense in competing with him. This guy is a force of nature. He's a scene-chewing, often ham-fisted, charismatic fireball. So Nimoy's approach was to stand there, stoic, silent, laconic, and he knew that was the best way to play off of Captain Kirk, and it strengthened Kirk's performance, and Kirk's performance strengthened Spock's performance. They really are a yin and yang. The one character doesn't work without the other. In subsequent shows and movies, we have seen Captain Kirk without Spock, or we've seen Spock without Captain Kirk, and it's always great to see the familiar face, but it always feels like something is missing. A giant piece is missing when one of them isn't there to complement the other one. Number 3 on the list is another original series character. Seems like I'm giving a lot of love to the original series, but again, there would be no Star Trek without the lightning in a bottle that the original series was. So, number 3 is Dr. Bones McCoy, who, if Kirk and Spock are a yin and yang, then Bones is the trifecta, the trinity. Spock and Kirk, for me, work well when it's just the two of them, but you throw Bones in there and you have pure magic. He is the curmudgeon in space, where everything is supposed to be evolved and advanced and enlightened and clean and run smoothly and logically. You've got this old curmudgeon who He's that old sense of familiarity, the real worldness, the nothing's working here, this is not going to end well. I wouldn't call him a full blown pessimist, although probably a lot of people would. Um, he does have a heart of gold. That's the important thing about McCoy. You've got pessimistic characters in movies and TV shows, naysayers, doubting Thomases, and they can really grate on your nerves when that's all there is to them. Bones has a heart of gold. He's got a twinkle in his eye. DeForest Kelley always brought a warmth to the performance, despite all of the complaining and the curmudgeoning, all of the perceived negativity. I always thought that the right underneath the surface of all of the crustiness, Bones was a happy guy, playful, and he also played off of both Kirk and Spock exceptionally well. He was that old friend of Kirk who was almost like an older brother or even sometimes a father figure to Kirk. And then with Spock, just hilarious banter between the two, where Spock being so unemotional and Bones being so emotional. A lot of the time it almost seemed like Spock was trolling Bones, provoking him, getting him to fly off the handle sometimes. Really entertaining to see those three classic characters interacting with each other on the original series. For number 4, I'm going to engage forward in time to the next generation. They brought Star Trek back in 1987, and luckily it wasn't just a pure reboot, rehash of what we had seen before. Gene Roddenberry went back to the drawing board, and there was none of this guy's going to be the new Kirk, and this guy's going to be the new Spock, and this guy's going to be the new Bones, and so on. He just decided to make it on a ship called the Enterprise, but it was a different looking ship, much bigger, and a totally different crew. So this crew was captained by Captain Jean-Luc Picard, and I remember seeing this show originally on TV when it first came out. There was a lot of hype for it, and even though I wasn't a big Star Trek fan, I was a victim of hype. This was put out as something you needed to see even if you didn't care about Star Trek. So I checked it out, and I just remember thinking it's too weird for me that the captain of this ship is this older looking bald guy with an English accent who's very poised. He's almost Shakespearean in this supposed sci-fi show. And just as a young man, I was thinking it should be something more like Captain Kirk, with the double axe handle and the punches and the drop kicks and the monkey rolls and the phasers blasting. Man of action. That's what I thought the captain of a Star Trek show should be like. And so at the time I didn't really get it. Fast forward years later though, and I'm so glad that I gave it another try, because I love the character of Jean-Luc Picard. He is all those things that I didn't really appreciate when I was younger, but I do appreciate now. The poise, the intelligence, the Shakespearean class, the manners, the restraint, the self-discipline. So important for people to be exposed to and to try to emulate, especially for someone who's in a commanding position like that. Very Spock-like, actually, even though the TNG crew weren't intended to be rehashes of the TOS crew. I thought it was cool that Captain Jean-Luc Picard has so many similarities to Spock. He tries to look at things the logical way, tries to talk things out. It used to drive me crazy when I was young, when I would watch TNG. Every episode they're trying to talk everything out. Why didn't they do it like Star Wars and fight it out? But now in my later years, I can appreciate the diplomacy that was employed by Captain Picard, letting cooler heads prevail. And he does also possess the same range as Spock. There were times where he would fly off the handle, but they were few and far between, and you remember them. They weren't so frequent that you just don't remember them and they're all jumbled all together. One of the times in the movie, one of the movies when he loses it and destroys his display cabinet of little ships and stuff, because it's so few and far between, when he does actually pop his lid, it makes it so much more powerful and memorable. And also going back to seeing the earlier performances, those are also more powerful because you know what's potentially bubbling under the surface, but he is choosing to take the high road, the classy road. In some of the later movies, it felt like they departed a little bit from the true essence of the character, where they had him going on away mission adventures and shooting a phaser rifle and all that type of stuff. And I guess you need to do that for big popcorn chomping blockbuster movies, but it's the show that I really love, and I think that's where we get the truest sense of Captain Picard. And I hope that the new show with Patrick Stewart now returning to the Star Trek universe will feel more like the TNG show than the TNG movies. I think it was important in the 80s, and it's just as important today to have a figure, authority figure, who has that type of composure. There are too many people in the world today who feel like all adversity and challenges need to be met with anger and rage, or being a badass. That's not the way the real world works. That's the way entertainment works. But the real world, the Picard method, works a lot better, not the Kirk method. And number 5 on the list was really tough. There's so many other great characters to choose from. Big honorable mentions go to Scotty and Geordie LaForge, Data, the Cisco, Tom Paris and Chakotay from Voyager, and Janeway naturally. But I had to, when I was thinking of this last one, I was thinking, all right, if they were to reboot or bring back or recast any of these Star Trek shows, thinking about it from a character standpoint, which characters would I be most interested in seeing? So if they rebooted The Next Generation, brought it back, all new cast, I'd be very interested to see it. But the two characters on that show that I would be most interested in seeing, what does this new actor do with the role, would be Picard, as mentioned, and the other one would be William Riker. Very similar to the yin and yang of Captain Kirk and Spock. There's that same type of yin and yang on TNG between Picard and not Data, but Will Riker. Now, Riker is pretty composed himself and intelligent, but he's got a gruffness about him. He's got that John Wayne type of gait where he puts his head forward and down and puts his shoulder forward, and he exits a room as if he's the Duke, John Wayne. He's got the deep voice. He's the one who, when he's in charge, when he's got the con, he wants sometimes, more often than Picard, to blast his way out of trouble, show of force. And I think with the way Picard is, you need that to play off of. And it's a great dynamic between the two on the show. You've got Picard, who is the authority figure, but Riker's opinions are also important. I mean, Picard calls him number 1, not number 2, which might be a little inappropriate, but Picard has a lot of esteem and respect for Riker. He's not always dismissing him like, oh, you hothead, just shut up and sit there. And let me admire your beard. No, Picard actually values his second in command and what he thinks, even if he is constantly correcting him, trying to tweak and hone, reshape Riker into something a little bit more calm, civil, classy, logical. And much like Bones, I think Riker has that twinkle in his eye, that childlike kind of sense of fun and wonder that keeps him from being tough, from being a badass. I never saw Riker as, the tough guy. I mean, that's what Worf is supposed to be, although Worf has that sense of fun and childlikeness about him as well. But I really like the fact that Will Riker can get worked up sometimes, but then immediately go from being angry and cocking an eyebrow to that sly Han Solo smile. He's got that Han Solo rogue scoundrel charm about him, even though he is a commander on a starship. So that's my top 5 Star Trek characters. A really tough list to whittle down to just 5. If you want to give it a shot, scroll down and go to town. If you're a classic Star Trek fan, be sure to check out my wife Luana's new segment on this channel called A Star Trek Voyage. and join the voyage with her and keep up to date on what videos are coming out and what topics she'll be discussing on her various social media platforms as well, like Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. Thanks so much for watching and supporting the channel, and until next time, my friends, live long and prosper. Okay, you can send a shuttle now. What the hey?